This is the last piece of a large AAA amethyst rough from the parcel that I imported directly from the Anahí Mine in Bolivia. I'm working hard to get permission from BOPIE, my wife, to travel to Bolivia to the mine in the near future and get some more rough. Wish me luck in convincing BOPIE that I really need to take this trip. This piece of rough weighs in at over 125 carats and seems to me that it's fairly well shaped for a briolet. I'm hoping to get a great return on the gemstone, hoping something like 40% return, and that would be pretty incredible. That would result in a gemstone in the 50 carat neighborhood, which is a whopper. Most non-cutters always seem to be surprised to learn that a normal return on rough is in the 20-ish% range, meaning that to cut a 1 carat gemstone, you can expect to need about a 5 carat piece of rough. There are a couple of amazing cutters. Yes, Boyd, for those of you that know Boyd, is an example of one of the amazing cutters who routinely gets a very high rate of return. These cutters don't use gem faceting diagrams, but they learn to cut by eye, and they take good notes and kind of design as they cut without a diagram. And they focus on retaining rough. So for them, a 28%-ish rate of return would be poor. But for the rest of us, it's normal. If you think about a rectangle, and a piece of rough shaped like a rectangle, and if you have a special order from a client to cut a round gemstone out of that rectangle rough, you can imagine that you're going to lose a lot of rough trying to get a round gemstone. But if that's what the client wants, that's what the client gets. So you can see how shape of the rough affects how much loss there will be in cutting a gemstone. And using a diagram, generally you lose more than if you were not using a diagram, but you get more of a symmetrical shape with the diagram than by freehanding it. So it's always best to pick a design that matches the shape of the rough, or if you have a design, look for rough that matches that design as best you can. Now, BOPIE wants a briolet, and I haven't cut one, at least, or maybe in years, but so I searched everywhere I knew of to look at designs to find a briolet design. There's not a whole lot of briolet designs out there, and I didn't find one that fits this rough or that I really grabbed me. So I decided to use my GemCut Studio. I self-taught myself through the software, the GCF software, and I want to create a unique gem faceting diagram with cutting instructions for this unique piece of rough. Now, I named the design that I've created BOPIE'S Whirlpool Briolet, and I'm going to make a separate tutorial video on GemCut Studio showing you exactly how I created this design so that you can create a briolet design in GCS. And I'm going to give you the cutting instructions. And that should be the next video I post here on YouTube. Stay tuned. I'm working on it. And to be clear, I am releasing the cutting instructions into the public domain. I'm not keeping them a secret, so that any cutter can freely use this design to cut BOPIE'S Whirlpool Briolet. Now, this design has 256 individual facets to cut and polish, and that's a lot of facets. But that gives this gemstone the whirlpool effect that I'm looking for. So wish me luck. This is going to take a while to cut and polish, and that's why I haven't had videos for a little while. I use 2-part epoxy to adhere this rough to the dot. Right now, I'm mainly using UV activated, light activated super glue to attach rough to the dot. But for larger pieces of rough, I still use 2-part epoxy. Someday I'll experiment and try out the super glue on large pieces of rough to see if it works. My hat's off to those cutters who are skilled enough to dop with wax. Personally, I never got the hang of wax, but to each their own. And I'm only showing you the way I do things. It doesn't mean that my way is the only way or even that my way is the best way. Use whatever techniques work for you. When you're cutting, you're the boss. Just enjoy cutting. So the first thing I've done is preform the rough into the outline shape, which would be the widest part of our briolet. So I cut 16 facets, starting with 96, all the way around at a 90-degree angle. And this is the largest, the widest that I can make this briolet, which is going to affect, the width is going to affect the length. You can see that the facets don't reach all the way to the end of the rough. And so this side, where they have a long ways to go to reach the end, the longest way, that's going to be the crown or the top, the upper side of the gemstone, because it slowly tapers down to a point. The other side, which is currently covered by the dop, that'll be the pavilion side or bottom side of the rough. The angles that I'm going to cut for the pavilion will be steeper, and when I'm done, it'll look something like the half of a ball. Since the girdle facets reach closer to the end of this end, the bottom half, that's going to be the pavilion. And note that in this design, there won't be a girdle. You could make a design with a girdle if you like, but I think it's best for the whirlpool effect that the first facet on the crown touches the first facet in the pavilion. You know, that keeps the whirlpool going. So no girdle, and you don't need a girdle. You're not attaching this stone with any prongs through a girdle. It's going to be attached at the end of the top of the briolet. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is just with a permanent marker, permanent that can be removed with alcohol. I'm just going to make a mark along my stone right here, and that's going to be where I separate the crown and the pavilion. Doesn't have to be exact. I mean, we're kind of making this up as we go along. So I just hold the Sharpie kind of steady and go around, and something like that. Not the straightest line, but it's okay. So now I will cut my crown facets, bringing them up to here. And the facets are going to be, the first one will be using the 96 tooth. And then since we're going to make a whirlpool, we just add one to each row. 96, 1, 2, 3. And for the angles, we're just going to subtract 4. So we start with a 90-degree angle. Right now we're at a 90-degree angle. So the first one's going to be an 86, then an 82, then a 78, and a 74. And continue on that as simply as possible till we get to the end. Again, the brightness in Gem Cut Studio doesn't matter. Window doesn't matter. None of that matters on a briolet because it's going to hang like this. It's going to hang this way on the necklace. So there's no crown or table or anything else. So nothing. The light is just going to be reflected the way it is. It's okay. And at least that's what I'm thinking. So let's go ahead and work on that. Okay, you can see where I made a Sharpie mark all the way up this 96 tooth mark for the girdle. And as I'm slowly walking the stone down using a 86-degree angle, again the 96 tooth, I will continue to slowly walk it down to somewhere around here. Doesn't matter if it's here or here. I mean, it really doesn't matter because I'm not sure how big this briolet is going to be when I'm done. So I'll walk it down to about here and then go to the next tooth, 96, 6, 12, 18, all the way around to back to 90 here, and cut the first row that way. Okay, so I've gone over the what is the upper half of our briolet. This will be the top part, the crown, I'm calling it, and preformed our amethyst using a 240 grit topper. So now I'll go over it again with a 600 grit topper, and then probably 3000 grit diamond on a bat lap, and then we'll polish. So coming along nicely. And the other thing I wanted to show you is my latest enhancement to my Ultratech faceting machine. So down here near the base, I've got a elbow pad. So just wanted to tell you that, you know, one of my other faceting friends recommended this. It's works great right in front of my Ultratech. Just fits perfect. Rest my elbow on it and no issues. So what this one is, there's many different options, but this is a wrist rest is all. But I turned it into an elbow rest. So you can get it on eBay, just a couple dollars. So if you're having problems with your elbows, you know, hitting the table, get yourself a Ultratech elbow rest or a wrist rest. Okay, so I've got the first 2 rows pre-polished with 3K diamond on a bat lap, and the other rows were with the 600 grit topper. So I'm probably going to polish the first row and possibly polish the second row, and then see what gap that leaves me between the third row facet. So I probably will have to go back over the third row, probably with the 600 grit topper, but we'll see. So I'll polish the first 2 rows of the crown. Okay, I've gone over the, actually this is the upper half, this is the crown of our amethyst, and with 3000 grit diamond on the bat lap. And so now I'll begin polishing up these facets. Okay, and my little wrist pad, which is really my elbow pad, is working great with my Ultratech. I can adjust it left-handed or right-handed. It's adjustable, so I can move it anywhere I want. It helps when I'm faceting, keep my elbows in this the pad. So this is actually a wrist rest that I got on Amazon. Works great, really helps me out. Sometimes I get, hit the crazy bone of my elbow, and this really works. Again, I didn't think this up. Another fastener told me about it, tried it out, and I like it, and it works great for me. Okay, I finished polishing the upper half, actually, of our Briolette, and I just used cerium oxide ultra lap, and so now I'll transfer our stones so we can polish the bottom half. Okay, so when I transfer my stone, to make sure I'm aligned properly after the transfer, I put the stone back into my quill, and I want a flat spot on the girdle to be at any of the indexes that I originally cut. I cut at the 90-degree angle, 96 index, and then every 6, the 6, the 12, the 18, 24, 30, 36, etc. So in this case, I put my index at the 48, and that's just because that puts the dop retention screw at the top of my machine, where it's easier for me to reach. But I could put it at any of those index teeth, 96, 6, 12, etc. So then when it's at 48 in this case, I rotate the stone so that there's a flat facet from what I originally cut at the 90 degrees. So then, to make sure you're in alignment, when you raise and lower the stone on a precision piece of metal, in this case, this piece of metal came from Ultratech, and you put that on your flattest lap, in which case this is my ceramic lap. It's my flattest lap that probably there is. And as you raise the stone, you're looking through the camera, but I'm usually looking with my loupe. Very close, I've got my eye right as close as I can. And you're looking for the stone to break the plane of the metal disc all along that facet at the same time. If it doesn't break at the same time, if this side breaks the plane and this side's still touching, you're not aligned. So once you get it in alignment, like we are now, I can cut the top half and, actually I'll be cutting the bottom half, and assure that both sides are in alignment and the facets between the crown and the pavilion are going to line up. Okay, so I've polished the first 2 rows, first 2 tiers on the bottom part of the gemstone, which is this part, and I'll continue to cut and polish the bottom. It's better for me to go one tier, one row, and cut it, pre-polish it, and polish it before moving on too far, because what I found is if I try to do the 600 topper on all the facets and then come back and do 3000 grit diamond on a bat lap on all the facets. You start leaving gaps and you have to go back to the 600 grit topper anyway. So it's better for me, it's quicker, it's turning out quicker if I just finish polishing a row and then go to the next row and pretty much finish it up. So then I'll polish this third row and then I'll get my 600 grit topper and for example, this facet is going to come down to touch there. It was touching when I did it initially, but because of the pre-polishing, they moved the facets a little bit. So that's why it's, in this case, I'm preferring to polish each row before I go on. All right, so our briolet is done. This stone took me a lot longer than most stones do because it's big, because there's a lot of facets, and because I was working on the gem fasting diagram for briolet as I went along. But it's done now, so now I'll put it, soak it in the acetone to get the two-part epoxy off. Then we can take a look at it and see the entire briolet instead of the part that's hid under our DOP. And we'll weigh it, measure it, and send it off to BOPIE. Today I finished cutting a very large Briolette gemstone. I had looked through all the diagrams available that I knew of, and I didn't find a Briolette that I really liked. Haven't cut one in years. So I used Gem Cut Studio, or GCS, and I used that software to design a gem fasting diagram that worked for this specific piece of rough. And don't worry, in a future video, hopefully the next video, I'll show you how I created this diagram, and I'll share with you the cutting instructions so that you can feel free to cut this design yourself. This briolet took me a long time to cut, more hours of cutting than I care to recall, partly because this is a large gemstone, partly because I was designing the cut in GCS as I cut the stone, and partly because this whirlpool design has 256 facets to cut and polish, and that's a lot. I also tried out my new elbow rest while I was cutting this stone, and it worked great. No more hitting of the old funny bone. Again, I didn't come up with the idea of the elbow rest. Another cutter did, and if I recalled the cutter's name, I would give him credit. I don't seem to come up with any great ideas, but other cutters recommend them. I certainly try out other ideas, and when they work, I let you know about them. This was a great idea. A BOPIE'S Whirlpool Briolet is a fairly straightforward design which any cutter should be able to cut. I would not attempt this as a brand new cutter simply because there's a lot of facets to cut and polish and line up. So it's going to take a lot of time. But other than time, it really poses no other issues for a cutter. So if you do cut BOPIE'S Whirlpool Briolet design, and I still do owe you the cutting instructions, so stay tuned. Again, I'm hoping for the next video that goes out. But when you do cut this design, drop me a line on Facebook and let me know what you think of the design. Photos are always welcome. I'd love to see photos of gems. So drop me a line. And as always, happy fasting, everyone.